Well, good morning to you and good morning to those who are watching online. We are beginning a new series this morning. I really get excited when I get to start a new series, and this one especially is exciting for me because it's one of my favorite things in Scripture are the parables of Jesus. So we're doing this series, and I thought we would start with one of these masterpieces of storytelling. Jesus was a masterful storyteller. He told these stories that were sometimes odd, they were kind of unanticipated, they were gritty, they were down to earth. And some of the parables, like the Good Samaritan or the Prodigal Son, they are known around the world and they've changed culture and they've changed history. They are considered these kind of masterpieces of literature and storytelling, and as a teaching tool, they are particularly powerful. I think stories are powerful, one, because they are easier to remember than bare principles. We remember stories and narratives and characters, and that sticks in our hearts even for years. And the other reason that stories are powerful, these parables, they usually can catch us off guard, maybe in a way that other truth doesn't catch us off guard. But parables, these stories, can have a twist where we're caught in it and we have to respond in some way. So parables usually require some response or some practical action. And this week, we kind of begin with this parable of the two sons, the parable of the prodigal son. And in Luke 15, the setting of this story is that that Jesus is surrounded by tax collectors and surrounded by sinners. And this wasn't accidental. It wasn't like the tax collectors and sinners all of a sudden realized, hey, what, Jesus got in here? How did he sneak in? It wasn't like that. They were seeking Jesus out. They were coming to him. Luke says in verse 1, so this is chapter 15, verse 1, he says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. Why were they gathered around Jesus? They didn't have very much in common, I don't think. This is an amazing detail about Jesus' life that is so compelling to me and maybe it's so compelling to me especially, because this is not at all my experience as a pastor. This is not my experience as a pastor. Being a pastor has this unexpected consequence where some people find out what I do for a living and they become a little more self-conscious. So they just are aware of, they're apologizing to me for when they're swearing in front of me. And that's a little weird, I think. I think it's weird. I'm not your mama and I'm not your conscience. So, you don't have to apologize to me. Or they're trying to hide like a pack of cigarettes, or not even a pack of cigarettes. Even like I've seen somebody try to hide a lit cigarette before. Now, besides being incredibly awkward to try to, hey, pastor, it's also dangerous. You could set yourself on fire. Don't play with that. Not everybody responds this way. It's not that. It's just that I don't like this feeling that all of a sudden somebody is feeling bad about themselves because they hear I'm a pastor. On several occasions, I've had people kind of launch into an explanation of why it's been so long since they've been in church. And I'm happy to listen. I really am. I don't mind listening to those stories. And maybe this happens because I get wrapped up in people's church experiences, like a good church experience or a bad church experience, whatever it is, I'm the representative of the church, and so I get tied in with people's good or bad church experiences, whatever their mind associates with the word church. And so immediately for some people, that association might be condemnation, or it might be judgment, or it might be something threatening, right? And this is the opposite of what it should be, because the church is the bearer of a message that is entirely from first to last about grace. It's about grace, and it's about the welcome of a father who is overjoyed when one of his sons or daughters who's far from him comes home to him. So why were the tax collectors and the sinners all gathering around Jesus? Simple, because Jesus was inviting and his message was inviting. And these people who were notoriously unrighteous, they found Jesus to be inviting, and his message not just to be inviting, but appealing enough to seek him out. Now, not everyone thought that Jesus' message was inviting. Some thought it was uncomfortable and a little bit threatening to them. And this is what we see in verse 2. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Can you imagine? They mutter, they grumble. This man welcomes sinners and he eats with them. He welcomes them favorably, like he's receiving them, eating with them, has dinner with them in their houses, or has dinner with them in whatever house he's staying in. Apparently, it was the notoriously righteous people, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who found Jesus and his message uninviting and perhaps even a little threatening to them. So Jesus has two groups of people around him, and these groups could not be more different. On the one hand, you have the good people who were not as good as maybe they thought they were. And then on the other hand, you have the not so good people who maybe knew that they were not quite as good as they needed to be. And then you had Jesus. Jesus didn't fit any of those categories. And neither group really understood what Jesus completely, what his message was completely about. The good people are over here scratching their heads, and they can't understand why Jesus was spending so much time with the not so good people without first requiring them to change their not so good ways. But then again, the not so good people were probably a little bit confused as well. Why would this rabbi, this representative of a very strict religious system, seek us out and want to spend time with us? Both groups were wondering why Jesus would associate with people who were far from God, because both groups had it wrong about how God viewed people who were far from God. So Jesus tells a parable. He tells a parable to answer this criticism from the Pharisees about him eating with tax collectors and sinners. And his answer, his parables, is to illustrate how God views those who are far from him. And what he does is actually he tells 3 parables. And all the parables are about things that are lost but then are found again. So first, Jesus tells us about a shepherd who leaves the 99 and goes to find the sheep that is missing. There's 99 sheep. He's got 100 total. There's one missing. He goes out and searches for it. That makes sense. Okay, you can see maybe neglecting the 99 sheep. They're going to be okay in order to go to find the one that was lost. And then he tells a story about a woman who had 10 coins and she loses a coin. And so she turns the whole house upside down looking for the coin. Okay, well, sure, that's a valuable coin. You want to go looking for it. And then Jesus starts into the third story, and the parable of the 2 sons. The other stories maybe are more straightforward, but something is lost, then there's rejoicing when it's found again. But then the third parable is a little more complicated. There's a little more life that happens in between the losing and the finding. And Jesus starts by saying that the younger son comes to the father and asks him to divide the inheritance. And the point of this part of the story is to show you how lousy and terrible the son is. His unworthiness as a son is shown by his disdain for the father. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the father. He lives at home. He hates every minute of it. He's only there because it's his source of funds. He's just waiting for his father to die. The son cannot stand it another day. He's like, I've waited long enough. He goes to his father and he says, hey, give me what's coming to me. Divide the inheritance. Give me your money. You're dead to me. At least give me the money that you owe me as an inheritance. And given this, this would be shocking today. This would be surprising for somebody to come to their parent or grandparent and be like, hey, I want my inheritance before you die. But given the setting among the Jewish law and the Jewish people, this is so shocking, it's hard to understand. Because you didn't do this. You couldn't really. We're not even sure. It was extremely irregular. It might have even been illegal. There might have been a way for people to keep this from happening, for a man to divide his inheritance before he died. But despite all this, the father agrees and maybe even has to liquidate part of his estate to give to the younger son. And so Jesus' audience at this point would all have condemned the son as a traitor, not only to his family, but also to his community. He's a disgrace. He's a worthless son. Well, so the son takes his inheritance and he goes off to a far country, and every step away from the father is a step toward freedom. No rules. I'm my own boss. You know what? I can do whatever I want to do. I can throw parties. I can live like a king, and I don't want anybody telling me what I have to do all the time. Until the money starts to run thin, And then the parties get smaller and the budget's a little tight and I got a little food maybe for a couple more months, but I'm gonna try to stretch my pennies, make it last a little bit longer. And then eventually, doesn't matter, the money's gonna run out at some point and he's got no friends, he's left with no family, there's nobody here to help him, nobody really cares about him when the money's gone. And he ends up working for a Gentile in an unclean business, he's just a slave feeding pigs. And this part of the story would have been so satisfying for Jesus' audience. They'd be like, yes, this is a great story. This is what we call karma. This is a good story. He asked his dad to give him his inheritance. Oh, he wanted what was coming to him. Oh, he got what was coming to him. And he got more. That's the order of things. You see, you disgrace your family and it's not going to pay off for you. That's what Scripture says. That's what Solomon says. That's what Proverbs says. Right? Old Testament wisdom right there. Solomon said in Proverbs, whoever brings ruin on their family will only inherit the wind. So there you go, son. It was right there the whole time. It also says that a wise servant is better than a disgraceful son. So a wise servant is going to be in charge of the father's estate before a disgraceful son will. Good story, Jesus. But of course, Jesus is not finished yet. And so the son thinks of home. Now, it looks like he's maybe sorry. He's repentant in some way. But he doesn't get credit for that now. Of course he's sorry now. He's starving. Necessity is the mother of invention. Of course you're going to be sorry now when you're feeding pigs. Well, where was that? 6 months ago when you still had money. You need me now, don't you? He remembers how they had food at home and even the servants could eat. And so he decides to go home, and if he's going home, he has to meet his father. And so he rehearses what he'll have to say. He's going to ask his father to make me one of your hired servants, which is basically the first century equivalent of, Dad, can you give me a job? And so he got up and he went to his father. And at this point, everyone in the story, I think everyone in the audience listening to Jesus' story thinks they know what's coming next. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with righteous anger. And he said, how dare you show your face around here? You're not my son. My son is dead to me like I was dead to him. How dare you come back? Or maybe he was filled with judgmental remarks. Oh, good to see you there. You got what was coming to you, did you? Yeah, how's it feel now? Let me just read you a couple of passages from Proverbs, okay? Let me quote a few lines about the disgraceful son. See what you think about that. Or maybe his father saw him while he was still a long way off and was filled with sarcastic skepticism. Oh, you couldn't hack it in the real world? Get yourself cleaned up? We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe get a job. And the neighbors say, hey, I saw your son, the one that ran off. Is he back? He's staying with us for a few days. We'll see if he's ready to change. We'll see if it's real this time. And see, that's the thing. How do you fill in that blank? You and you personally in our church, when our church sees those who are far from God, when you see those who are far from God, how do you fill in the blank? When he saw him and they were a long way off, the father was filled with. And what we feel, what you feel, what our church feels, to feel what God feels towards those who are far from him is part of what being the church is about. It's what churches feel when they're serious about reaching those who are far from God. The father saw him and was filled with, say it with me if you know it, compassion. How does God feel about those who are far from him? Compassion. The father recognizes the son and begins to run. So he's got to pick up his robe and tuck it into his belt and run. Like some foolish person. Only servants run, messengers run. And then his son is filthy from feeding the pigs, and he wraps his arms around his son and starts kissing him. It seems almost like the son is giving his rehearsed speech while the father is kissing him. Like he can't even get it all out. In fact, the father interrupts him before he finishes the end of his speech and says, no, hey, servants, bring the robe, bring the sandals, right? He can't even finish his speech about being a hired servant. Bring the ring, put it on my son. This is not just forgiveness. This is not just overlooking the past. It's not just mercy that passes over punishment, like I'm not gonna punish you. That's not what this is. This is not conditional acceptance based on changed behavior. We'll see how it goes. You can start working for me, and then if you earn your spot, I'll make you my son again. This is pure and unadulterated grace in its highest form. There is restoration, readoption. Let's have a huge party for my son. He's back. And it's uncomfortable how much utter disregard there is for the son's behavior. Wow. How the son has acted and what he has been through and what he's done and what he's been doing in the intervening years, those are never even taken into account here. It's like they are completely irrelevant to the story that Jesus is telling. The story that Jesus is telling is the story of the first two parables. It's the same story. Something was lost, it's found, God rejoices. Everyone gets that when it's a sheep. Because a sheep never loses its value, even if it's lost, even if it's wandered off. Everyone gets that when it's a coin, but they don't seem to see it when it's a person with a past. Of course you look for the sheep. Of course you look for the coin when it's lost. The coin is never less valuable just because it's missing. Its value is the same regardless. The sheep is still worth the same to the shepherd, even if it's separated from the 99. Because the sheep's value is simply in being a sheep. And the coin's value is simply in being a coin. The sheep can do nothing to lower its worth in the shepherd's eyes, and the coin can do nothing to lower its worth in the woman's eyes. In the same way, the son's value is simply in being a son. It's the same regardless of where he is. The history and the past and the behavior and the hurt obscure all of that, but the value of the son in the eyes of the father doesn't change because the son is a disgrace. It has nothing to do with that. The son can do nothing to make himself less valuable to the father. His value is in simply being the son. There is simply no connection here between the son's behavior and the father's love. And we always want to connect those, don't we? We want to connect up love with behavior. And it just doesn't have anything to do with the story I'm telling, Jesus says. Jesus is telling a story about God's grace. And the son was never less valuable, even when he was in a far country squandering his father's wealth. Grace that welcomes and celebrates when people who are far from God accept God's offer of grace. That's what this story is about. Now, what about obedience? What about repeated misbehavior? What about fairness? Let's talk about justice. There is a place to talk about all of those things, but not in a story that's about grace. Because in a story about grace, there's simply no connection between any of those things and grace. Now, if the son were telling his story, he would probably tell you all the things that he had done wrong. And he would tell you like how lousy he was. And maybe he'd tell you about, his heart and repentance and all of those things. And maybe he'd tell you about how, he changed, all of those things. I don't know what he'd say. The older brother, if he was telling you the story, he'd probably tell you how lousy the younger brother was, and then maybe throw in his own track record, on top of it. But Jesus is trying to get us to see the story from the father's perspective. My son was dead to me. Now he's alive. He was lost, but now he's found. That's it. So we had to celebrate. Have you ever lost a toddler? They wander off and you just can't find him for a while? You ever had a kid who maybe wandered off in the grocery store? I lost Asher for about 15 minutes when he was 2 years old. And 15 minutes is a long time to look for a 2-year-old. It's a long time. We were outside. We were in this kind of apartment thing. We lived in England. There was like a garden there. There's a library in this part of the house, and you could go around to the street. And we thought, well, maybe he wandered off. Maybe he's in the street. We had people looking all over the complex to figure out where he was. And when my eyes saw his white blonde hair again and his smile, do you think I cared at that moment why he ran away or what he did while he was gone? No, I didn't care. I just took him in my arms. I just kissed him and I held him. I was so glad he was back. And in God's story, you are the reason for the celebration. not what you've done. You are the focus of the celebration, not what you've done. Just you. Isn't that incredible? Can you imagine one of my other kids complaining about my joyful celebration of finding Asher by saying, well, Dad, I've been here the whole time, you know? And I'd say, yeah, that has nothing to do with it. Your brother was lost. He's back. That's the story. The gravitational pull of God's heart is toward those who are far from him. God's compassion and mercy is targeted on the lost sheep and the lost coin and the lost sons and daughters. And Christ came to seek and save that which was lost. So he rejoices when one sheep is found, when the lost coin is found, or when the son or daughter returns home. And if you've already come home to the Father, then he wants you to join in the welcome. Your job as a church is to share in the welcome, share in the party of those who come by the grace of the Father back home. He wants you to be a part of seeking and inviting and welcoming and celebrating those who are far from the Father, accepting his offer of grace. And the truth is, maybe that's not the gravitational pull always of churches, or my heart or your heart. It's maybe not. Like the gravitational pull of most churches maybe is that it's just towards the 99 who are already here, or to the older brother who's already here. It's toward the paying customers or the squeaky wheel, or the energy is expended on keeping the 9 coins instead of finding the lost one. And over time, I think that can happen in a church. It can become a place where it doesn't feel very inviting to those who are farthest from God, right? Because it doesn't seem like a celebration. It doesn't seem full of grace. And that's like our job. Our job is to align our hearts back with the Father's heart, because the pull of God's heart is towards those who are far from him. Have you ever lost something valuable? And if somebody else wasn't looking for that valuable thing, it kind of frustrated you even. You maybe couldn't sleep because you're up late at night thinking, where is my wedding ring? Where is my wedding ring? I had it here, where is it? And Candace lost her wedding ring one time when we were having a garage sale at the house. And so during this garage sale, we stopped everything. We had some friends there, and we started like turning the house upside down to find her wedding ring. It was really important to us personally, obviously. But can you imagine if during that time, like Candace is like sweeping all over the house, like trying to find her wedding ring, and I just decide, you know what, now's a good time for me to organize my stamp collection. You say, Collin, you have a stamp collection? No, because Candace threw it out the window so that I could look for her ring. It's gone. That didn't really happen. I never had a stamp collection. I looked for the ring the whole time. The ring was stolen, but don't worry, we found it again about 1.5 years later. So I'll tell you that story at a later date. The point is, can you imagine God looking at us sometimes and saying, what are you doing? I'm looking for these. I'm looking for these people who are so valuable to me, and you in the church, what are you doing? Do you know how valuable even one of my sons or daughters are who don't know me? Oh man, I think maybe God does. Maybe God gets frustrated with me sometimes. He's like, Collin, pay attention. That's the mission. It's the people who are far from me. That's the mission. That's what the whole thing is about. And who is the person you're praying for? And where is the place that God has put you strategically to reach out? Is there anyone that you're investing time with, being a friend to, inviting to lunch so that you might reach that person that no one else can reach maybe? You see, there are 2 sons in the story. And some of you fall into the younger brother category, and some of you fall into the elder brother category. And if you're the younger brother or sister this morning, if you've been in a far country, you've been running from God, you need to know that in God's story, you are the focus of the celebration, not what you've done, just you. Regardless of what you've done, the Father wants to welcome you home with a party. And this church wants to share in that welcome when you accept the offer of the Father's grace. But if you're an elder brother or sister this morning, and I know many of you you've come home to the Lord, you know the Lord, and you've experienced the Father's grace. And so I want to ask you a question. What should the elder brother do? What should the elder sister do What should we do? About a half a century ago, about 50 years ago during the Vietnam War, Life magazine did this story on a guy whose brother was missing in action. He's a pilot and went down behind enemy lines. They couldn't find him months and months and months. And finally, a guy named Donald Dawson, this is a picture. That's him. He's looking for his brother. And this is him handing out pamphlets. He had pamphlets printed in Vietnamese so that he could go to Vietnam. He left his wife, he had 3 stepchildren, he left his home, he left his job, he left everything in California, and he flew to Vietnam, and he was trying to find his brother. And he became known. It was a very dangerous, he went through very dangerous parts of the country, but he was never killed. He was armed with a pistol, and then he had the pamphlets that he brought. Amazingly, I don't know, nobody killed him. They just called him the brother of the pilot. The brother of the pilot. It's just the brother of the pilot. And he looked all over the country in search of his lost brother. What should a brother or sister do who shares the Father's heart of compassion? You see, the older brother should have gone in to eat at the feast. Yes, absolutely. He should have been glad to go in at the feast. But what else should he have done? Well, if he'd have been a true older brother, he probably would have been watching along with the father. Don't you think? And when his younger brother had come home, he would have seen him way down the path, and being a younger man than his father, he would have run faster and gotten down to his first and gotten his arms around him first. Don't you think? What more should he have done? Well, this is the third parable in Luke 15. The first one is about a shepherd who has 100 sheep and loses one. And what does he do? He leaves the 99 and he goes to look for it. And the second parable is about a woman who has 10 coins and she loses one of 10. And she turns the house upside down looking for it. And here you have a brother who has one brother and he loses one of one. And what does he do? Absolutely nothing. He does nothing. But what does the true older brother do? You see, Jesus Christ is the true older brother. Jesus Christ is holding himself before his hearers in this parable. And he's saying, I'm the figure that stands behind the false older brother. Yes, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they complain that I eat with tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus is saying, you know what? You Pharisees are just like the older brother in the story. You won't join in the celebration. You're just like them. You won't go in to eat with sinners. But who is going to eat with sinners and tax collectors? Jesus Christ is. Who is the true elder brother? Jesus Christ is. Who came to seek and to save that which is lost? Who's the one seeking the sheep? Who's the one seeking the coin? He's the true elder brother. And why does Jesus do that? Because he understands the Father's heart of compassion and grace towards those who are far from the Father. You see, the truth is that we could never have made our way back to the Father on our own unless our elder brother Jesus Christ had come not just from the next country, one country to the next, or from a far country, but from heaven to earth. He came in search of us. He came for each of you and me to bring us home. And if you've already come home and you feel what Jesus Christ feels for the one who is far from the Father, then you do what the true elder brother does. You go out and you seek the younger brothers and sisters and you tell them, I have found it. I have found the way home to the Father. And I'm here to tell you that he is waiting and he is watching for you to welcome you with open arms and a party. Forget about what you've done, because in the end, you're the focus of the celebration. Not what you've done, you. Let's pray.